In this episode, we're going to cover something we've seen in passing in other episodes, but that we haven't really explicitly called out. It's a rather important technique, and I would find it sad if we just lost it in the cracks of everything else we're putting together. Today, we explicitly call out how to make values available to all of our views without adding them to each render call. You may wonder what this has to do with upgrading to Express 4, since I haven't shut up about that for 2 episodes. Well, like a lot of things, Express 4 changed how this was done too, and Node/ uses this functionality. So it seemed like a really good opportunity to set this straight. Anyway, let's look super fast at how we put things into the view. We're continuing on with our toy app that does nothing from episodes 26 and 27. You'll see that we've added Jade to the app, and that we've done all the setup to get Jade working. Now notice that in our generic route, we've commented out the old string to send and replaced it with a call to res.render, passing it a template. And here's the template. Notice that we're calling random bytes on crypto. Let's see what happens when we run the server and access this page. Boom is what we get. And it's pretty obvious why. Crypto isn't defined in our view. It is a core node module, but that doesn't mean our view can see it. We know we could just add it into our render call like so, but that would only work for this one handler and sort of defeat the entire purpose of this episode. We want a way to access this in all of our views. Now I just want to highlight quick that this is reverted back to Express 3 for the time being. We're still using Express 3 here because I'm sure not everyone has changed to Express 4 immediately. The Express 3 way to wire this up is quite simple. We simply call app.locals, where app is our Express instance, and pass it an object that we want available in our views. And then we can hit our page, and we see we have some random bytes. That's swell. Now this style is good for values that won't be different between each request. That perfectly matched crypto's random bytes function. Yes, the bytes were different each time, but the value that the view used, namely crypto, was static. That never changed. View helpers like the accounting package would be another fit for this style. Then you could attach it to your views here, or maybe you want to attach an app version. Basically, anything whose value would be consistent across requests is appropriate to put in an app.locals call. However, if you wanted something like the current user to be available, this would be a terrible place to do that since you don't actually have a current user when the app is initializing. For this case, we need something that runs with each request, and we call those middlewares. First thing, we've pulled that wonderful string to send that was so informative into the view, but when we go to view it, boom again. Rec is not defined. In general, I would say it's bad form to attach the entire request object to our views, but this app, believe it or not, is not production grade code. It's an academic exercise to show how things get wired together. So we're going to attach the entire request object. Here's a simple middleware that does that. We just call locals on our res object, and just like for the static version, we pass it an object whose properties we want to access in our view. Note that we're also using the util package, which is bundled with Node Core, and let's not forget to call next so that it doesn't hang. And then we inject it into our routing queue like so. Then we can restart our server, and look at that, it loads. So how did Express 4 change this? The big change is that app.locals and res.locals are no longer functions. We used to call them, passing in an object that had the values we wanted to appear locally. Now they're just properties that we assign values to. So rather than pass in an object with multiple properties, we break those properties out like so. app.locals.crypto equals require crypto. And then in the middleware, res.locals.rec equals rec and res.localsutil equals require util. Now that's a real subtle change, but it's there. And if you're not looking for it, you might end up booting up your old app, seeing it fail on app.locals, blah, 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 going to Express 4 documentation, seeing that app.locals is still there, so why would it be failing? And then realizing that reading carefully, all else being considered, is still helpful. Now, I probably should call out that the way Express 4 requires us to do this worked in Express 3 too. We didn't have to call res.locals in Express 3. Assigning the properties worked just fine for that. However, if you did use the function call version, which Node/ does, now you know how to avoid the nasty surprise. Having defined these, always in the view properties, What happens if in our render call we pass properties that collide with the ones we defined earlier? Who wins? Well, let's reload our server and find out. What are we seeing here? It looks like some values just disappeared. This is what we expect. In our view file, we were accessing rec.method inside of the square brackets. That used to have a request method in it, but it looks like our render call beat out what the middleware did. Rec is still defined, it's just a string, and strings don't normally have a method property, so it just turns out blank. Same for path, which is also blank on our page. And it will also override the static version, which we can see if we add crypto to our render call. This one actually goes a bit boom though, because now we're trying to call a function that doesn't exist on the new crypto value that our view actually sees. What if the middleware had tried to override the static version? The middleware would have won. So, render call beats middleware, which beats the static version. And this makes sense because think about the order they're called in. The static version defines properties that get attached to our res object when it's created. The middleware executes later and overrides those. The actual render call runs last of all, overriding everything. So what's the path of least confusion? Don't have naming collisions in your view variables. But if you're going to do it, now you know the precedents. So, there you have it. Wrapped up and explicitly called out, we've captured how to make values available to all of your views. We've also hit on the override rules. This is a really great tool to have in our belts because it lets us dry up our render calls. But it also, fingers crossed, sets the stage for us to actually go ahead and update Node/ like we were supposed to do for this episode 28. We actually are getting there because Node/ is cutting edge, and as such it ought to have all the latest modules. So stay tuned for next time, and until then, happy coding.